What's up everybody, it's Metamyther back with another video. Today we're talking about Proteus, an inspiring generative music tool with an extremely approachable interface that aims to transform how you create, explore, and evolve melodies. We'll be testing the module to its limits, building an entire track using Proteus as the sequencer. If you're very much used to the traditional mode of creating fixed sequences to drive your music, as I am, stick around for this one. My hope is that you'll get inspired to approach generative music in a whole new way. Check out the description for Perfect Circuit affiliate links. Your support helps keep this channel going and is truly appreciated. The reason I'm excited about this module has to do with the inherent difficulty of creating music using generative techniques. This difficulty is primarily aesthetic. At its worst, generative music often sounds very random, or computer music-y, if you will, which is what happens when a human is not present during the process to curate the results. Seaside Modular has figured out a really nice way of getting aesthetically pleasing results with Proteus. So as we use the module, just keep in mind that we're listening for musicality first and foremost. Alright, with that in mind, let's check out the front panel. A bit about how we're approaching this video. Proteus outputs a single gate and volt per octave sequence, so we're going to focus on a single instrument at a time and track as we go into the DAW. Once we have all our layers, we'll arrange it into a complete song. My goal is to not make it sound like a random mess. To get this guy moving, we're first going to patch a clock into the gate in. So you can hear it's already giving us some sort of sequence, and if we want a new one, we just press this center button. Alright, as far as the controls, at the top left we have length, which is the length of our sequence. Let's set it to 1 bar for now to begin with, but it can go all the way up to 32 steps, or 4 bars. Then we have the density knob, which controls how many notes are in the sequence, or how dense the sequence is. Also notice that as I increase or decrease the knob, the same notes are added or subtracted. So this is a really good way to just create variations very simply without introducing a completely new sequence each time you touch the knob. This alone is a really great feature. Under here we have the scale knob, which conforms the generative melody to a bunch of preset scales, and you can also constrain it to a set of your own scales as well if you want. Another feature I like is that the notes are being produced within 1 octave, so it's not jumping around completely randomly as a computer music sequence might be doing. Instead, it tries to play the way a real player would, which is by making smaller jumps. Over here we have the octave knob. This introduces a probability that notes will be transposed by an octave above and below the main sequence. In addition to you obviously hearing it, the LED lights up yellow. On the right side of the panel, we have the sleep and patience knobs. Sleep has Proteus wait a certain number of pulses before playing notes in the sequence. I tend to have this set completely counterclockwise because I always want the sequences to play more on the grid, but we're going to play around with this control as we create our track if we want to create more space before each sequence fires again. The patience knob controls when a new melody comes in. If the knob is set more on the counterclockwise side, Proteus will get bored of the melody quicker and will eventually introduce a whole new melody. The center button will change colors to show that this is happening. For certain parts of the demo, I'm probably going to have the patience set at its maximum to clockwise, which means that Proteus will keep playing the bass melody until I choose to change it. This leads us to the last 2 parameters, mutate and complex. Turning up mutate increases the probability that individual notes will change. You can tell it happened when one of the LEDs lights up purple. To me, this is a killer feature that allows sequences to slowly morph over time as opposed to suddenly, which is much more musical. Complex, as you might think, is the melody complexity of the sequence. All the way counterclockwise, you're going to get very simple sequences with pretty much only 1 or 2 different types of notes, and more types of notes will be added as you turn the knob clockwise. Last bit of the interface, you have the 2 switches. The left one, when you flip the switch up, will lock all of your settings. So this is really great if you found something that you really like and you don't want it to change and you just want to stick with it for a bit. Flipping the right switch up accesses additional settings, which we won't go too deep into in this video, but just so you're aware that there's a bit more under the hood as far as customization. Alright, then these 4 buttons underneath, those are our presets. If you have a sequence you like, you can press one of the slots to store it. Super easy. To erase one of the slots, hold the button down for several seconds, and it will remove the preset so then you can put something else on there later. So I think you'll agree that these controls are really intuitive. For me, modules are all about the interface, and this just has a really inviting layout that just gets you up and running really quickly. Alright, let's get into making the actual track. Another aspect of this generative melody making is that you sort of don't want to go wild and modulate a bunch of the parameters. That'll probably make your results sound much more random, which again, we're not really going for. We're going for a natural musical flow. The one exception to this is the density control, and I'm going to use that in my drums. All right, cool. That's the demo. What'd you think? Does that give you some ideas for incorporating generative melodies into your patches? Fair enough, you might not want to do the entire thing generatively, right? But I think you can see the potential for using one or more Proteus elements and then supplementing the rest of the track with more thoughtfully conceived sequences. A mix of both of these creates a really nice interplay where things remain super interesting for a really long time. If you'd like to see more module workflows and reviews, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.